that appears to me to be a retail bakery, when it's titled that. So I don't know if we need to identify that as an exception, because it's included under the 311. I don't know why it would be titled that if it's not retail.
But typically, if the company manufactures their own product,
And they sell
it
bales
is
or whatever.
considered. I mean, for example,
Yeah.
the candy factory would probably also have a similar manufacturing NAICS code, because they manufacture on site as opposed to a retailer that just sells someone else's.
Okay, so then, I guess that's my question then, is it our intention to exclude retail in that kind of a scenario? Has there been any discussion on that?
Well, in that case, again, they have to sell so much, 50% outside of the state, isn't that correct?
Well, if they're manufacturing, they don't have to sell 51%.
Okay,
They're
they're
considered
manufacturer,
a
has
manufacturer, and so they're eligible for the program.
Okay.
There's, to my knowledge, from either of the advisory boards, been no discussion on trying to exclude any company that does their own manufacturing.
So, as I understand what you're saying, because they manufacture and then also sell, they're really included under manufacturing versus retail. Does that answer your question?
Because retail is, they're issued a State Department of Revenue tax ID number for the purpose of selling and collecting sales tax at retail. And that is different than a wholesaler, that is the middle person that sells to a retailer. So I see a distinction.
And is your concern that,
I don't have a concern, I just want to make sure that we all understand that if we're excluding retail statutorily, that we are also including some retail here, just because of the site code, the code, whatever, industry code.
sure. And I guess, the question that comes to my mind is whether, given that retail, there's an exemption for retail within, codes within the statute. My understanding is that exemption is present in part because retail businesses don't need the same types of encouragement to site in places. They're going to go where they're going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to go where people are going to spend money at retail. I mean, and we've all seen vagaries in that market over the last 10 years. If you drive to St. Louis or the city, you'll go by now large vacant outlet malls, in Odessa and in Warrenton that were once thriving, and now those retail facilities have largely dried up. For whatever reason, those types of retail establishments are not eligible to participate in this program.
Right.
And there are types of retail establishments like bakeries that are, because they produce their own product on site. And is there, I guess my question is, given the general framework, is there some kind of unfairness within a retail setting that allows for that would allow for a bakery to qualify that, but not some other type of food retailer? And if so, are we concerned about that? And I don't know the answers.
But yeah, I don't know the answer. I'm just like, I want to make sure that we all agree what we're doing.
Mike's provided some information, I'll just kind of pass it around. He's looked it up, so kind of look at it. What it says about retail bakeries, why they're included.
Oh, good. Okay.
Appreciate that.
I guess an ice manufacturer would be the same type of thing, right? But it doesn't have that, I'm looking now at 312-113, see, it doesn't have that separate designator of retail ice. And that just jumped out at me for some reason, that it does have that.
Which number was that again?
311811. Retail bakery. It has the retail in front. It's in the manufacturing list.
Okay.
but it does have retail. But it had, you know, one right above that, bread and bakery, product manufacturing, but I don't know why, Pat, you're right. It's kind of, I mean, that's the subcode, and then these are the, I mean, this is the subcode to the large one, so, commercial bakeries.
If you'd like, I could ask DED if they would approve that particular code or a code like that as far as for state benefits under the program.
I tell her I saw it that way, but I didn't go through here admittedly and read every little thing.
Well, I went through, just my process of getting ready for this meeting and to talk about the NAICS codes was to go into the NAICS codes, try and look at them, see ones that jumped out to me for whatever reason, and think about that. And that retail bakery is the one that jumped out to me. But cocoa manufacturer, cocoa bean chocolate, not chocolate confectionery was, because I happen to like Patrick chocolate. It's a chocolate manufacturer that is here in Columbia, been here for about 6 years, and makes excellent chocolate bars. So, and that is part of what led me to call Bernie yesterday to inquire which of our existing manufacturers and that are within our areas, what are their codes? And because I think that will help inform our work, because I think we need to know that.
Right.
And, you know, when we set up what businesses are eligible, we don't want to accidentally include or exclude businesses that exist. You know, I think part of what we need to understand is which businesses exist in our proposed zones, and if we want them to be eligible and encourage them to grow that way, make sure that they're on our list. If we don't, make sure that they're not on our list. You know, if there was a cigarette manufacturer out there, Route B, Mr. Morrow probably would say, let's keep them off the list. You know, we don't want them peddling their death sticks to kids in our community. Others might disagree. I happen to think that tobacco manufacturing is not a terrible, it's a pretty clean industry. It's not, you know, it doesn't have a lot of externalities that way, although the end retail product has pretty serious health risks. But I asked Bernie to do that, and he sent around yesterday a list of codes of businesses that are in the zone, and that was helpful to me to.
And the lists you received are generally the larger employers. There are the small, for example, the smaller that you mentioned, Patrick Chocolate. You know, it's like if you look at the directory of manufacturing for Missouri, I mean, companies like the candy factory would be considered in there as manufacturers also.
The other concern that kind of came to my mind, besides knowing what we have, is whether this board wants to try to integrate into its thinking environmental concerns with certain businesses. The one that jumped out to me, that triggered it in my mind, was heavy metal manufacturing. I've been in steel mills. I've seen how they operate. They're very big. They're very, you know, they make an impression on a community if they're there. I don't think we're likely to attract a business like that to this community for lots of different reasons. But, you know, I wonder whether we need to be thinking about environmental consequences of business codes as we do our work.
I think that's the discussions we've had. You're exactly right, yeah. I mean, we want this to continue to be an environmental friendly community. And that's the question, and that was the debate we had before. Do you try to limit it, or do you leave them on here and then let our judgment go if the application comes? Now, a lot of this will never happen, obviously. So that's a good discussion we need to have with the new committee.
So if you leave steel manufacturing on here, for example, and then you have an application 3 years from now for smelting, whatever, gold. So then the advisory committee at that point in time
I think we could still turn it down. couldn't we?
turns it down, even though it's approved as a code here and becomes part of the ordinance?
Because it says we have to look at all the applications, so if it was just a given, I'm not certain where we'd look at it for.
Well, first of all, I mean, something like that would have to get through all the local planning and
Right.
zoning
Exactly,
processes,
right.
permitting processes first. But I believe that if you have a list that says that code is eligible and they meet the job requirement, then you would be, if you turn it down, I guess you would just open yourself up for some
You have to have
criticism.
another reason to turn it
Yeah.
down. And then, was there discussion by the previous committee on animal slaughter, rendering?
There was.
It was.
Was that a big discussion? Or
It
just-
was, and that was removed.
Okay.
Yeah, right, I think it's.
So is that still removed here? It's not, is it?
No,
We would
we're
be,
starting to do.
we would need to.
Right.
These are the two that we included last.
And I think getting back to Jeremy's perspective, we kind of were thinking about what would the impact of certain industries be on the infrastructure of the city? And would there potentially be an infrastructure issue if certain industries came here? And that's one of the discussions.
Right,
Water usage
yeah.
is a lot.
But understand, the maps we're looking at go beyond the city, the corporate city limits, so it's a county issue. So you need to think in terms, you need to think globally here.
Yes.
It's not in,
The infrastructure of
Okay.
not just the city, but
Right,
the
right.
whole area, right?
yeah.
And, to follow up on that comment, the site approval zoning processes for sites that are exclusively within the county would be the jurisdiction of the commission, and that process, as I understand, is probably different than the City of Columbia process. I'm sure there's a process, I just don't have quite the same familiarity with it.
So then, we all agree, if they are excluded from the approved list by this committee at this point, then that is where an application would not even be received.
For EEZ.
For EEZ,
They could
right.
still, they
For
could still apply to
right.
move a
Oh,
business
sure.
here.
And as Bernie said, there's a lot of things that have to go through.
Right.
So, but for this particular program.
My position on that is I'm kind of leaning more about including as many codes as possible and then let the application process weed them out. I'm thinking about boundaries, what we were just talking about. The modern approach to steel mills and those kind of companies nowadays is the most successful ones actually recycle. They're not bringing in raw ore and melting it down and making new products. What they're actually doing is taking old bridges, old metal, stockpiling it, and making to-order products. Recycling, we might shoot a major recycler in the foot, by excluding it. If they don't meet our own environmental standards as a city, as a county, they may wash out at that time. We're talking about environmental hazards. One of the biggest industries as far as American manufacturing in the future, and we're probably going to be at the forefront of that if we're not already there, is nanotechnology. And for those who don't know what nanotechnology is, it's machines on a micro atomic level, you know. And there's also a lot of issues concerning health issues with that. You know, I'm in the concrete industry, and they're gonna start using nanotechnology in concrete, where they can run, they can pick up barcodes off a car or a truck and weigh a truck without it having to stop or read license plates. That's all well and good, but what's the effect on the worker that's laying the concrete with these nanotechnologies? You know, you ingest these things, what happens? We don't know. So it's a dangerous balancing act, but you know, we don't really want to, you know, I'm kind of the mindset, don't shoot them in the foot, let them kind of prove their wealth in their, you know, in their practices. Let the process, if we're, you know, if we want to stay an environmentally friendly city, let the process, their application process, weed them out if we don't think that they're going to be responsible. A lot of the future manufacturing things coming down the line, I think we need to be prepared for those. I'm not necessarily worried about what's going on now. I'm worried about how we prepared to grow for the future. We're worried about manufacturing. Let's keep that in mind.
I think I want to understand better than I do right now, our ability to influence eligibility at a later point. You know, that I know that there's language in the statute that says the board reviews applicants. I don't understand right now what that review contains. And I think in order to make an informed decision about whether we should be, whether I'm comfortable going broadly with codes, or if I want to try and see if this board wants to narrow it for some reasons. I want to understand better what our ability is later to impact the application process. Because if we can just give thumbs up, thumbs down to a business that's otherwise eligible, it would eliminate some concern. But my impression right now is I'm not sure that we can do that. If they're eligible and there's a zone and they want to site there are the planning and zoning and siting processes that they will have to go through. But from an enhanced enterprise zone tax incentive perspective, that's really what we're in control of. Can we decide not to give a lead smelter the eligibility if lead smelting is one of our eligible codes?
My understanding, Bernie, is it's probably two questions. One is, if we decide, this committee decides that that businesses are eligible, and somebody applies and they fall within that eligibility, at that point in time, my understanding is we could not say, well, we don't like you. We couldn't change the game. Now, we might have the ability to change the game as we meet annually for future, but can you clarify? If not, maybe we had to come back and clarify in future.
I'll have to come back because I don't want to rule on it myself.
Yeah.
From what I understand of the program, I mean, is it under the tax credit application, you're basically verifying that the company is in the zone in the first place, their address meets, that the NAICS code is eligible from their list, and that you've agreed to do a tax abatement of at least 50% for 10 years. To turn them down on some other reason, I'm not sure. Let me check into that to see what other abilities you would have to turn them down without.
I think the term advisory means something here. I think it may mean, and I can have further clarification Bernie on this, but advisory usually means you you support or you don't support, but the final decision rests with the enacting authorities, whomever that may be. And so I guess if this board then determines eligible codes and they're outside that code, then in my opinion, it would be almost a stamp of disapproval from this board, and it would be hard to override that and make it an approval when this board actually included them to begin with. So I don't know that we would have the final say, but I think we would have the responsibility to approve or disapprove based on what we decide as a board now. But that would be my understanding based on how other advisory boards work under state law, because there's a lot of them. And I'm not aware of any of them that have actual final approval. There may be some. I just don't know any.
And I think you're right. From our role as an advisory board is to advise the city council and to a somewhat lesser extent the county commission as a joint applicant, because the proposed zone might extend into county jurisdiction. The ultimate decision on what the map looks like, on what the codes are included, rests with the council. Our job is to make a recommendation to them based on our discussion of what is appropriate for Columbia. So that's
looking at this that you provided that shows the other areas of the state that have approved codes, and they've done it at the 2-digit level, not at the 6-digit or whatever we are looking at here. Help me understand why I know I've read it, but I don't recall. Why are we looking at the 6-digit level rather than the 2-digit like these have done? What was the reasoning behind that? Do we know?
Just to be more of, I think, take a more of a conservative,
Yeah, just really
be
try
more
to-
selective and more
Right.
conservative approach to it.
Okay. That's what I thought, but then when I saw the word retail, and I'm like, then I must be missing something here, but I guess I'm not.
Yeah, most communities do go with a 2-digit code, and maybe have 1 or 2 exclusions. And you, as I passed out that last week on that map, and also I emailed the link, you can go to each zone and look at what their codes are. And I think you'll see that most of them are 2-digit codes.
The other thing that occurred to me as I was going through the codes is whether we're creating incentives for our existing businesses to relocate within our town. And I don't know, the specific code that brought this to mind is millwork and lumber yards, because Boone County Lumber has their yard right over here behind Mojo's, between Rogers and Park. I used to live over there. I used to live on St. James Street, right? And went over there and got a door that I think is a desk in our house, a damaged door. Anyway, millwork is in like a 32 code, 32 something. And I know Mid-City Lumber is out Paris Road, and so if they expanded with the current North Zone map, would be eligible for incentives for expansion. It seems like to me. And Boone County Lumber would maybe have an incentive to move out there or move south. I know that you probably know better than I do. Meeks or something. There's a. It's
Down Bryanston.
yeah.